Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1011A, and today's date is July 1st, 2016, and the title of the episode is Obama Makes a Push for International Order and One Global Economy. Now, before I get started, let me just make an announcement of why there was no report on Thursday, June 30th. I was moving my entire family to a new rental place. I do rent, I do not own. The landlord told me about 2 weeks ago that they wanted to sell. I said good luck, because there's 3 or 4 of the units I was in for sale on the block, and they've been on the market for a very long time. And they were getting very nervous that something was going on in real estate. They wanted to sell, and they gave me 2 weeks to get out. They're saying they're breaking the lease, and I said fine, no problem. And I started to look around. Actually, I found a nicer place for less money, because I noticed that rents are now coming down. They're not as high as everyone thinks they are, and you can bargain very nicely with many people. And I was waiting for my internet to be turned on, and I was waiting and waiting and waiting, and it never happened. So I was not able to do the report that day. And now that I am back up and running, it should be smooth sailing from now on, except for the collapse, war, and everything else that's going on. Let's get into the economic collapse financial news. Now, the last couple of days, the market erased almost all the losses due to this Brexit, which really hasn't happened yet. By the way, this was just a referendum. The UK, the Parliament, the EU, nothing's happened. This is a 2 to 4 year process as they go through this. But what we see is the market has gone up. They pushed it up as best they could with the high frequency trading, the plunger protection team, free money from the Fed, everything completely manipulated. And then we notice gold. Gold has gone up again. And this is something that we need to watch. Because when gold starts to make these large moves like we've been seeing, and they're going to get larger as time goes on, it's letting us know they're losing control of this economy. Now, right up to the point when this economy comes down, they're going to be pushing the stock market to the highest they possibly can. They did this back in 1929. They did this back in 2008. They do whatever they possibly can to keep the system alive. But we know that this system is dying. That this system that they're talking about, this system that is built on debt, it doesn't work. I mean, look at Greece right now. Their unemployment is double of what the EU averages. Since 2008, there were 858,000 businesses of all different sizes that were registered. At the end of 2015, the number fell to 613,000. That means there's around 244,000 businesses that completely disappeared. And it cost about a total of 842,000 jobs and 30 billion euros in products. And as they're reporting now for 2016, this number is skyrocketing. It's not going to be any better. It's going to be worse. Now, here in the States, we see Puerto Rico, and I know Puerto Rico is not a state, but here in the United States, Puerto Rico, they're going to be defaulting on their $2 billion in debt today. And what we're seeing right now is Alejandro Garcia Padilla. He has issued an executive order authorizing the suspension of payments. In addition, also declared a state of emergency at the island's biggest public pension. And what we're seeing right now is this pension is completely underfunded by 99%. And this is the first time a U.S. territory has failed to pay on its general obligation bonds. Under these circumstances, these executive orders protect the limited resources available to the agencies listed in these orders and prevents that these can be seized by creditors, leaving Puerto Ricans without basic services. So it looks like things are about to get a lot rougher in Puerto Rico. Moody's, on the other hand, they're looking at the U.S. retail sector, and they're saying U.S. retail sales, well, they're very disappointing. And they're looking at the major companies like Walmart, Macy's, Nordstrom, Kohl's, and they've lowered their expectations on U.S. retail sales growth. It used to be between 4 to 5%. They have lowered it to 2 to 3%, and they're saying as they go throughout this year, they're hoping the holiday season is really going to help out. But if it doesn't, and if it's like what it was last year, they're saying sales growth might be around 1%. This is absolutely awful. Walmart stores, they reported net sales up less than 1%, while profits slipped by 7.8%. Macy's quarterly sales were off by 7.4% from the first quarter of 2015, while profits plunged by 40%. Kohl's reported the overall sales drop by 3.7% compared with the previous year, and profits are down by more than half. And we know that there's a lot more stores closing. And when we look at the situation, things are deteriorating very, very quickly. I mean, we're in the middle of the summer right now. Middle of the year, in the summer, I should say. And we're starting to see the housing market completely fall apart. The bubbles are popping in New York and San Francisco. The rental market is actually now sliding, not doing as well as it was before. And what we're seeing now is that things are rapidly slowing down. We know that manufacturing is not doing well. We know the unemployment numbers are a complete lie. We see construction spending. Well, that is declining. It has plunged 3% in the last 2 months. This is the biggest drop since February of 2011. So when they tell us that they're building like crazy, housing is incredible, well, the opposite is happening right now. All of a sudden, things are starting to go the other way. And we knew it would because we've been tracking this, we've been watching it. Now, the IMF was out there, and they have said Deutsche Bank poses the greatest risk to the global financial system. They also said the German banking system poses a high degree of possible outward contagion. Well, let's not forget about the UK, the US banks, the banks in France. They also have the highest degree of outward spillovers as measured by the average percentage of capital loss of other banking systems due to banking sector shock in the source country. So what we're looking at is that these banks, they're in big trouble right now. I mean, look at Italy, for instance. Italy, their banking system is dying. Now, we understand that Europe has a bail-in policy, but we see that Italy was saying, listen, we're not going to use the bail-ins. We want to bail out. We're not going in to take the deposits of the people. We're not doing it. So the European Commission, they've authorized Italy to use government guarantees to create a precautionary liquidity support program for their banks. Now, what they're doing is they're using the Brexit as the excuse for this crisis. So they're saying, because of this, this is why we'll do the bailouts. This is why the banks are in tough shape right now. And they're going to use the Brexit crisis to achieve two things. For quantitative easing, which the Bank of England already said, yes, this is what's going to happen. The ECB, to facilitate bailouts for insolvent Italian banks and any other bank in the EU. So when we look at this Brexit, we say to ourselves, was this planned? And I said this in my other report. Did they use this to deflate the bubble a little bit? Did they use this as a ploy to say, because of what happened here, we need to create more currency, we need to save the banks by giving them funds, and we're starting to see that this is exactly what has happened. We're still hearing talks about another referendum in the UK, even though the petition that was put into place was completely fake, phony, and false, because we realized that they were all fake signatures created by this script by a hacker, bouncing it off all different servers. And what we're seeing right now is they're still pushing for a second referendum. Because remember, the UK is still part of the EU. They haven't done anything yet. If they can get this second referendum, and I continually hear John Kerry out there saying that the UK can stay with the EU. It's not that difficult. And I think they use this as a ploy. And eventually what's going to happen is they're going to have this next referendum, and the UK is going to say, sorry, we're going to stay with the EU. Maybe they'll come out with something like they've given us a better deal, something's a lot better. But we hear from George Soros when he was giving a speech discussing the EU in the wake of the Brexit, and he's discussing how the EU can take a giant leap forward, how the EU can be strengthened by this Brexit into a greater central superpower, paid for by the subjects living within the EU region, and resulting in greater coercion of the people in the sector by a more powerful EU governing body. So he's telling the EU, the European Parliament, that the EU should go on a massive multi-billion euro borrowing spree. Surge funding, he called it, to restructure the EU, shore up its powers, and become a much greater influence over Europe. And then we have Obama. He was giving a speech in Canada, talking about the international order, the New World Order, and how the integration of national economies into a global economy, he's saying it's here. It's done already. He said the UK, they're trying to escape the global responsibility by voting to leave the European Union. And he's saying that we're going to try hard to push all of the countries together and create an international order that works for our people and create one big global economy with the central bankers in charge. So this is really the New World Order. This is what they've been talking about for a long time. And when we continually look at this, we're starting to realize they're going to be using the Brexit as the excuse of why the central banks can do more now. Deflated a little bit of the bubble, allowed the Italian banks to get a bailout instead of using the bail-in documents at this point. They're trying to keep the system going a little bit longer. And they're always coming up with different ways to do this. And we're going to have to sit back and wait to see if the UK actually leaves the EU. Right now, I believe the central bankers are going to do whatever they possibly can to keep the UK in the EU. Somehow, some way, they're going to come up with some type of an excuse where they're going to say, no, it's not happening. We'll be stronger together. And they're going to continually push this. Now, we see with Obamacare, healthcare costs, they are going to rise sharply, and we've been seeing this all along. We see the Kaiser Family Foundation, they put out a report on healthcare, and they're saying that this does not look good at all. And they're saying it's going to get worse. Healthcare expenditures from 1960 to 2014 have skyrocketed. And with Obamacare, it's just going to get worse and worse right now. And the costs are continually increasing. Remember, this is not a benefit to the people. High deductibles, very expensive health insurance. This was created for the health insurance agencies. I mean, taxpayers, they're going to have to shell out an estimated $18 billion more to subsidize Obamacare in 2016. Even though the enrollment is much, much lower than they expected. They thought they were going to have about 21 million people enrolled right now. And guess what? They have about 11. And more people are dropping out. And it's getting worse as time goes on. And the situation here, as we can see, is not going to improve because we're seeing more and more people get laid off. We're seeing more and more people that are saying, listen, I can do without health insurance right now. They don't meet the requirements of being subsidized. It's just too expensive. And as we go forward, this entire system is going to implode on itself. And we can see it is already happening in certain areas. And the economy is slowly deteriorating. All the different economic sectors are not doing well. Sometimes they have these little surges and peaks, but when we look at the trend over a period of time, it's all in a downward trend. We're deteriorating very quickly. The collapse is upon us. And the central bankers, they're doing whatever they possibly can to prop this up so they can get something started to blame this collapse on another group or another country. Because they don't want to be blamed for what is about to happen. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.